You came early. I
Hi.
saw your email. I will send the paper to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I
Yeah,
was able to find everything else.
I think you can perhaps find it on my Google. Oh, what is it? Google Scholar, but I'm not sure. I have it, so I can send it to you.
I looked and I couldn't find it, and I searched just online and couldn't find it. I found the other paper from 2020. I just couldn't find the one from 2021.
I see. Yeah, I will check it. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I hope I'm giving some credit for students, so hopefully they show up. I should mute. Hi, Daniel. Where are other people? Hi, Esther.
Hello.
I'm tired already.
Yes, same.
I don't know why. I need to make. We're starting in 1 minute, so. Where's the speaker? Who's the? Oh, Jessie. Hi. Hi, nice to meet you, Troy.
Hi, nice to meet you as well.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So where are you now?
I am currently calling you guys from Colorado Springs.
You go school there?
Yes, ma'am.
Please call me Shion.
It is UCCS, the University of Colorado in Colorado Springs.
I see. Yeah.
Hey,
Hi, Dr. Gill.
how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, really good. Miss
So
you.
I miss you too. I'm so excited to see all the presentations today.
Yeah,
Also really liking the new online format. Is that due to like the new online status of the degree?
it's due to pandemic. We just
Love that
kind of,
too.
switched over at that point, and it works well, I think.
Very nice. I think it works very nice as well.
Yeah. So I assume you met the others.
Somewhat. A lot
Okay.
of hidden faces right now.
Okay. Well, Dr. An, I know you can see Dr. An's face, and Dr. Speller. Dr. An is Dr. Self's position, and Dr.
Okay.
Speller is, well, kind of the position that we got back when we lost Dr. Cordova's position. So
Okay. Very nice.
yeah, Dr. Self and Dr. Atchison Brown retired in 2020.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah.
There's Dr. Bond. Nice.
So I guess we're waiting for everyone to join. Or are we?
Yeah, I think we need a speaker to join the first one. Where Troy will go first, I think, and then Rachel. Her last name in the printed version is different, but the Rachel is there, and hopefully Dr. Bond give permission them to present. You have a so that's so. Dr. Gill, please introduce, I guess. I think I will mute myself. Yeah.
Okay, so hi everyone, and welcome to the 2022 Psychology Student Research and Creativity Conference, and very excited to have an alumni, Troy Sanders, who is in a graduate program, and I'll let him talk about what he's doing and give his spiel, but he's here to kind of give our opening welcome and talk about research and the psychology program, and I don't know whatever else he's prepared. So take it away, Troy.
Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Gale. Well, good morning, everyone. Congratulations and welcome to participating in the research conference for Eastern New Mexico University. This is the first time that I've seen it happen online, so I'm loving this really cool format. I think it's really awesome. It's more immersive for students. But yeah, so I'm an alumni of the psychology department. So I went to Eastern New Mexico University from 2015 through 2020. I majored in both psychology and biology pre-med. And so originally when I started at Eastern, I was a pre-nursing major, and then it just took a few classes of psychology 101 before I was like, wow, this is something I really want to get into. And so after pursuing a few classes in psychology, I got in touch with Dr. Gill through the psychology club, and I was able to start pursuing student research that way. And that was a huge component as to me carrying on in graduate school and wanting to pursue future academic endeavors. And so currently I go to school at the University of Colorado in Colorado Springs. I am in the master's program for cognitive and evolutionary psychology here. And so I do a lot of cool research involving the psychopathology of autism and depression in an evolutionary sense, as well as looking at the evolutionary perspectives of emotions. And as of right now, I'm actually working on a really cool project that's world immersive. And so it's looking at about 185 countries and subcultures in terms of emotions. So really cool stuff going there. And that was actually due to a lot of the great opportunities I had through Eastern New Mexico University. And so I'd highly recommend if you guys aren't already, see if you can participate with faculty in more perspective research and things that you're more interested in, things that are going to get you in a program that you're looking more towards. Eastern does have a very varying array of professors with varying backgrounds. So Dr. Gill and Dr. Bond are both cognitive experts in my understanding, and they both have very immersive experimental backgrounds as well. Dr. An, I haven't had the opportunity of fully meeting her yet, but if I imagine correctly, social psychology, and Dr. Spell as well. So see what they're definitely interested in, what they're capable of working with students, so you can have an opportunity for graduate school. But yeah, no, Eastern was a really great experience. I hope you guys are all having a really good opportunity there. And that's pretty much the only spiel that I have right now. I'm open for questions if you guys have them. I would just say raise of hands and then we can go that way. Okay. Dr. Gill?
I was just gonna ask you, like what, when you got involved in the clubs, right? And that was pretty early on, right?
That was during my freshman year of undergrad. And so I actually stayed through the club for about 4.5 years total. And through that, I was actually able to do quite a few different things. So I imagine the Psychology Club Clavos Hounds is still active.
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it had a lot of awesome research opportunities. So I definitely say if you guys aren't participating in it already, definitely try to jump on that. A lot of cool volunteer opportunities, research opportunities, as well as just opportunities to engage and expand your scope of psychology as a whole. That's one of the best few things that I gained from the club probably in general was a better perspective of all the different subfields of psychology. Because when I came into psychology, I was very much fixed on you could be a practitioner, you could do research, but I wasn't so familiar with all the different subfields such as IO psychology, cognitive, evolutionary, and so on and so forth. And so definitely join it if you haven't had that opportunity, because it definitely will help expand your view and give you a better insight as to maybe what you want to do, whether it's clinical or research.
And you presented research at how many different conferences while you were?
Oh gosh, I believe I did 5 conferences total during my time at Eastern. And so I participated in the the SRCC e-menus research conference. And so that was a really great opportunity. It was actually the very first research conference I ever presented in. So it was a really good buffer. It came about probably like a week and a half before I went to the first semi-national wide conference. And so definitely helped out quite a bit in terms of breaking nerves. Not in a bad way, but even now, like as I'm in graduate school, one thing I've always personally struggled with is personal speaking, just because I'm a very nervous, antsy person. But these opportunities like that will definitely help give you the foreground that you need when you're looking into graduate opportunities or wanting to just do even just counseling as a whole, because you do have to present clients with valuable research. You have to be ready for opposals to thoughts, things like that. So it helps out in those ways. But yeah, so the other 4 conferences were in really awesome places. Denver was one of them, Sacramento, San Francisco, and then I was able to do a virtual one during my last semester at Eastern for APS, which was in Chicago, or supposed to be in Chicago that year. And so due to COVID and everything like that, just didn't work out, but really great opportunity. So that's another great thing of participating in the club and research as a whole, is it gives you those opportunities to do presentations and get the training and kind of just more of a grasp of what research actually is. A lot of people have this idea that research is this huge, scary thing that you need to be some sort of mathematical expert to jump in on it and have a real grasp with it. But it really just comes down to finding a certain knack for it or finding a drive in order to do it. Because really what it comes down to, the crunching the numbers, it's looking at your results, and you just have to find a way to interpret them. So it's not scary, but that's definitely one of the great things of the club. So help me with research, definitely with practice, but yeah.
And as I recall, when you were in Sacramento, I think was the first one where all of you had the opportunity to interact with people from all over the Western United States and got some valuable information, like career-wise, about all the things you could do.
Most definitely. Yeah, no, and that's one of the better things. So everybody that went on that trip had really great experiences as a whole. Personally, that's where I ended up picking up my second major in biology, was actually right after coming back from that trip. And that was due to actually having the immersive experience of having presentations in health psychology, which it was something that wasn't hugely covered, even just textbook wise, because it's a newer subfield of psychology. But there was presentations in that, positive psychology. And so, yeah, no, it's just a really great opportunity, really immersive, expanded my views in terms of wanting to do neuroscience more specifically as my end goal, and trying to figure out how to get there. And so that's a whole nother thing as well. Definitely take advantage of Eastern's really easy degree program in terms of if you want to double major, do multiple majors. That also helps out in terms of getting into this grad school program that's more specified for you, because they definitely love it when you have a better background knowledge in certain fields. Sorry, Dr. An?
Yes, I have a question. I have a comment.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm social, but I also do experimental mainly.
Oh, nice.
I really do agree with you, the point that you made. Psychology is very interdisciplinary. You can't just do psychology. You have to have understanding of other things, right? So it's great that you point out that you double majored biology. You can at least minor. It doesn't have to be biology, something else, So you have more broad perspective, because otherwise, where you have to be open, I think. Often some people think that, I'm doing this, therefore I will be just hanging up on this, No, it's better to actually see from other perspective. But anyway, so I have one question, or I want to hear from you how important you think at this point, since you're graduate students now, that research experience was, because often students don't realize that until they apply or until they are in graduate school, how important the graduate research experience was, So
that's something I still think about, and not in a bad way, but it takes me back to the moment of going through applications and how stressful that process was. Yeah, no, definitely. Just in terms of doing all the undergrad research, when it came to applying for programs and having that very surreal moment of, oh, okay, I'm actually going to do something. It definitely helped out in terms of knowing that I had some applicable skills that can be applied further than what's just on paper. Because when you have a undergraduate degree and you just get it in psychology without any sort of practicum of research or anything like that, that's where it can be very, very hard to become a strong candidate whenever it comes to applying for graduate school, just for the fact of it's one of those things of, are you going to participate in research and is it going to become overwhelming just for the fact you haven't been, exposed to it? And I think that's probably the biggest stressor that I dealt with applying to graduate school was, am I going to be okay enough in the application process to actually go through this? Am I going to actually make the cut by any means? But that's where having 4 years of research definitely helped out versus some programs that have, paid internships, they have, paid research experience, things like that. Doing it in a voluntary sense, it definitely felt a little different in terms of, I didn't think that it'd be the same versus some people that have, lab grants and things like that. But just having the experience overall, it's just what's important. It doesn't matter how you do it or, what kind of school program it's based out of. As long as you just have the experience there, it makes a huge difference just overall. I'm trying to think how another way that became more applicable. Even this year, I'm actually TAing for general psychology. So it definitely helped out quite a bit in terms of having those speaking skills, especially just in an open room. So the class that I TA for, it's actually for about 210 students. And so I have to do about 4 in-person presentations a semester. So it's pretty nerve-wracking, but going to those conventions where I was exposed to at least 100 different people walking by the poster, asking questions about research and things like that. When it comes to just talking about psychology as a whole in this particular instance, it definitely helped out quite a bit having that undergrad experience.
I have a question. How do you compare yourself to other graduate students who just came into your program? What is their background, and is their preparation as good as yours? Can you comment on that?
Ooh, that is a really good question, Dr. Vaughn. And it also kind of reflects Dr. On's comment as well. So it was very interesting meeting a lot of people that I'm in the program with, just for the fact of the program at the school that I go to, they have a lot of different sub backgrounds. So there's a lot of people jumping in a lot of different things. We do social psychology, evolutionary, cognitive, developmental, trauma psychology. And so there's a huge mix of just different backgrounds from everywhere. You would be surprised, and this is one of those things just from Eastern, because a lot of students love to double major either sociology, psychology, criminal justice, and psychology. They're very good backgrounds together. I really have not seen that a huge thing here, and that's not a bad thing. But I thought I'd be seeing a lot more, just background, social, applicable knowledge. But in my lab, everybody besides me, actually has a background in anthropology. So I found that to be very interesting. And they also have a mix of minors in biology as well. So we all kind of hover around the same thing, but there's all different knowledges feeding into other things. There's a cognitive lab right now that's actually doing conspiracy research, and all 3 of their lab researchers, they're actually all biology backgrounds. And so besides one of them, I believe 2 of them were neuroscience majors as an undergrad, and one of them has a psychology minor. So it varies a lot. It just depends on finding your knack for research and what goes into it. In terms of stacking against other students, when it came to applying for programs, a lot of students have a lot of varying background fields. So it just depends on what you're trying to shoot for, and I guess what the specific advisors that you're trying to apply for when you go to grad school. Because one thing that's very important when you go to graduate school is you have to at least identify a few people that you want to do graduate research with. And so that's where I think some skills may become more specified, but in terms of being admitted into the program, I think everybody had around probably 2 years of research on an average, just between all the students. I had the great opportunity starting really early through Eastern, but a lot of the students there, just through majority programs, they do a lot of research just doing junior, senior year after they've already developed, statistical course background and things like that. So they have a little less experience. But yeah, about 2 years overall. So even with that, they all have very applicable skills. Not in a bad way. Some of them are very much more knowledgeable, especially in terms of like evolutionary psychology. Some of my lab mates that have more anthropology backgrounds, definitely a lot more immersive in it, because evolutionary psychology is not something that's widely, I guess, widely studied in the field at the moment. It's a very, it's one of those controversial fields depending on how you want to look at it in the lens. So yeah, so it's one of those things that is very interesting. But in terms of stacking up, I don't think it made a difference in terms of how much research I did. I think it just came down to how committed you wanted to be to research and actually displaying those skills, like when you have the interview and actually, you know, write the letter of interest.
I have one more question. So finding a master's program actually is not that easy for psychology, right? Usually they are combined program, you know. So how did you find, I mean, I think it's however great that you found master's program, and how did you do that? Can you explain? Because some students, I think they can be stepping stone or, you know, but they don't know how to. I mean, so if you could elaborate on that, it'd be nice, I think.
Ooh, I can. The search for graduate schools. Now that was a journey in of itself. Yeah, so it just comes down to knowing what kind of specialty or subfields that you're more or less interested in, and at least start looking at schools, you know, adversely starting with Google search, and then, you know, really looking at professors' backgrounds, the publications that they've done, the full research background of them. For me, it came down to looking at schools that were specialized in, again, cognitive psychology. And that's just because my end goal, academically speaking, is cognitive neuroscience. And so I knew that cognitive psychology would be a good median in order to get there at a master's level. And so when it came to looking at schools, there were initially about 60 schools that came up in my search. And so it came down to states that I thought I'd be at least like happy in, because, you know, when you go to school, it's one of those things, at least be happy, immerse yourself in a good place. You don't want to go to graduate school in a place that's going to make you unhappy, because that will reflect on your studies. And so find a place that's really nice. Schools can be cut down that way, and then look at professors in the program, what kind of research that they're doing, see if it lines up with some of the things that you want to do. And if it does, you can always email those professors as a prospective student and say, hey, I'm very interested in this kind of research. Is this something that, you know, your laboratory is also doing, or something that you're looking towards doing? Because whenever I was applying for UCCS, the school that I'm going to, luckily they had a full list online that was showing all future interests as well as all the professors here. And so when it came to looking at the cognitive program here, my advisor is actually specifically evolutionary psychology, but he wanted to look at the evolutionary perspectives of psychopathology, but he was looking for students that had a strong biology background. And so that's where I really wanted to jump in as an applicant that way. And all the other schools that I applied to, they actually all had very differing backgrounds. And that's just because as a psychologist, you can have a lot of differing interest fields and you don't have to necessarily narrow it down. So that's another thing to remember. But yeah, I applied to schools like NMSU just for looking at their AI robotics program. So that was one small interest field that I had. Evolutionary psychology was another interest field. And the other third school that I actually became very serious about applying to was actually a school in Western Washington University. And they actually do more like schizophrenia-based research, and it's more biology-based. And so they all had similar avenues that I was looking towards. And so I applied to all of them. And whenever it came to making the decision, it really just came down to figuring out, as a career, what would be more, you know, applicable, what would be best for me actually wanting to do in terms of, am I committed to it, or do I just like the idea of doing it? So having passion is also what matters, but I hope that answered the question. It seems kind of vague, and I apologize if it does.
Oh no, that's great. But how many total you applied? My case, I only applied 5 and 6 at the time when I was young, but I regretted it actually, because it's expensive to apply, I know, but it's better to apply more. Of course, you have to contact, you know, it's a whole process, right? So
for sure. I did 5 schools total, and that seems to be about the average that most students do when applying for graduate programs, whether it's at a master's or a PhD level. And so 5 schools, out of all of them, I had really, really good turnout. And so I got accepted more than I thought I initially would. So that's one of the things as well. Don't be afraid to apply to more schools. It will better your chances, but that's where, again, just identify programs that are at least going to make you happy if you do get accepted to them, so that it's a possibility that you may actually want to look into. Just because one thing that is a very real thing that I've noticed since coming to graduate schools, there is a high amount of students that do just, disenroll or drop out of programs. And that's just due to, finding out that they don't want to actually do, academia as a career path that they thought, or, they aren't ready for this adventure in academia. Because it's one of those things that, you get burnout, and it's a very true thing, even as a graduate student. And so you always just have to make sure that you're doing it for reasons that make you happy, more or less. But yeah, 5 schools, that's what I'd say is the magic number in order to get a good, decent turnout. There's some students that do way more, some students that do way less, because there are some students that are very specific on, I have created this path and I know what school I'm applying to. I've hit all the marks for it. So if you're that kind of candidate, definitely apply that way. But if you're somebody that's just kind of, I would say I'm more or less a drifter. I was just looking for a program that kind of just met the needs and wasn't too specific on admission requirements or anything. And I had a really good turnout. So whatever works best for you, but yeah.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question, and I'll ask it, I guess. What advice would you give these students here who are, say, juniors or seniors, and they've never been involved in, say, faculty research or anything, and they'd like to go to graduate school? What kind of advice would you give them?
Ooh, so good advice. So I guess to start out with, the best advice is try to figure out what you want to do with psychology specifically. Because one thing that I've noticed, and this is a great thing about the program I'm in, because they've already divided it up, is you'd either primarily want to be a researcher or a practitioner. And they're both perspective, like good fields in of themselves, whether it's clinical, non-clinical. It just comes down to how you want to do it. So in terms of doing even a clinical track, so even wanting to become a counselor, at times some programs do require some research. So, it's one of those things of at least having some background in research would be helpful just as a whole 1-2 years maybe. But take classes that are going to definitely help you out. So that's what I'm saying, having minors or another major in a specialty field that's, going to make it more applicable. Because one thing, research experience isn't necessarily everything when it comes to applying for grad school, because a part of grad school is also, we're finding and building, graduate research experience and presentation experience. And some schools are very open and very immersive of that idea. And there's some schools that are very much more competitive just for research reasons, and they typically will take on people that have more defined experience. So that's more or less looking at the schools that you want to go to, just kind of look at what they're looking for research experience. That's where you need to email some professors, maybe ask some questions like, hey, I see your program, I've been checking it out for a few years. What would be some good background qualities that you would want for a candidate in this program? Or just ask, questions of, since you're doing research in this field, what would be one good way of me getting, involved in this field right now? Yeah, definitely take research experience, ask questions, know what you want to do. Let's see. Always apply for graduation on time. That's just a normal, don't pay that late fee because it's not fun. And another thing, don't be afraid to ask your professors for recommendations if you are applying for graduate school as well, especially for the seniors. And so that's one thing that I was very scared of. I've worked with Dr. Bond and Dr. Gill for several years over through classes and research outside of courses. But I still completely tippy-toed around asking about recommendation letters. And so that was a very scareful thing, but you'd be surprised on how much your professors actually want to help you get into graduate school. And so that's another great thing of just, if you haven't done research, it's as easy as just asking if you can participate in it, especially if you are, psych student that has a more strong, motivation for it. Definitely they're looking for students that have a very strong motivation to do research, because it's somewhat of a commitment. You can't just hop on to a research project, get your name on the poster, and then go from there. You do have to put in some work for it. So just ask and get those opportunities, and it'll definitely help out. But yeah, so opportunities, know what you want to do. Don't forget the date to pay your graduation fee. And that's pretty much all I'd have to say.
Well, I will jump in and say thank you very much for being here and speaking with us and all your words of wisdom and describing your experiences. And I hope you enjoy viewing the rest of the presentations.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, I think we have a couple of minutes and then we have Rachel Wellborn. I don't think she's here yet. But let's just kind of take a short break and we'll be back, okay?
I'm here. I'm under Rachel Dudley.
I'm sorry, I blew that. All right.
Oh, no, it's
Rachel,
okay.
you can share your screen and go ahead and get set up and then we'll start right at 10:30, okay?
Okay,
All right.
sounds good.
Uh-huh.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me. My presentation is based on an experiment I conducted and a research paper I wrote regarding signal detection theory in visual art identification. So what is signal detection theory? It's derived from the domain of psychophysics, which is the study of how people psychologically interpret physical stimuli. And it provides a structure for studying and explaining decisions that are made in ambiguous circumstances. So this could apply to any kind of decision that's made in an ambiguous circumstance. It could be something like a doctor trying to diagnose a patient based on symptoms, or even thinking that you may have heard your cell phone vibrate. So what are we looking for? There are 4 different possible responses in signal detection theory. The first is a hit, which is when there is a signal and the individual involved says, yes, there is a signal. The second is a miss, which is when there is a signal and the individual involved says, no, there is no signal. There are false alarms, which is when there is no signal and the individual says, yes, there is a signal. And correct rejections, which is when there is no signal and the individual says, no, there is no signal. So there are basically 2 ways to correctly identify whether a signal is present, which are hits and correct rejections, and then 2 ways to incorrectly identify whether or not a signal is present, which are misses and false alarms. Okay, signal detection theory in practice. So the original signal detection theory experiments looked kind of like a hearing test, and they involved the participants just trying to detect an audible signal that sometimes appeared in noise and sometimes didn't. And the participants would say, yes, they heard a signal, or no, they didn't hear a signal. And the answers were categorized into hits, misses, false alarms, and correct rejections. Okay, so let's look at a real life example of signal detection theory. So imagine that you wake up in the middle of the night and you have a pounding headache. And then the other members of your household also wake up with a pounding headache. And you all know that there's a virus going around your community that causes headaches. So you think, okay, I must have contracted this virus. But then some of the members of your household start feeling dizzy, and you remember in the back of your mind an article you read a long time ago that talked about carbon monoxide poisoning, and it described the symptoms, which included headaches and dizziness. And you think, okay, maybe this is a virus, but it's kind of strange that we all woke up at the same time with these pounding headaches. So then you're thinking, did we contract a virus, or could this possibly be carbon monoxide poisoning? So if you leave the house, you call the fire department and they come and check things out, and it turns out that it is carbon monoxide, then that would be a hit. If you assume that it's a virus or a bug and you go back to sleep and it turns out that it actually was carbon monoxide, that would be a miss with potentially very negative consequences. So if you leave the house, you call the fire department and it turns out that you actually just had a virus, that would be a false alarm. And then if you are very confident it's just a virus or a bug and you go back to sleep and it was indeed just a virus, that would be a correct rejection. So actually the reason that I included this example in my research paper and that it was particularly salient to me was because this situation happened to me just a couple of weeks before I started learning about signal detection theory. So when I started learning about it, it was the first thing that came to mind. And if you're wondering, it actually was carbon monoxide. So the reason that it was so ambiguous was because I was having to rely on how I felt because I didn't have a working carbon monoxide detector installed in my home. So yes, if you remember anything, remember to make sure you have a working carbon monoxide detector, and then the situation will not be so ambiguous. Okay, so what are we measuring? First of all, we measure discriminability, or D prime, which measures a person's sensitivity to the signal. So in the carbon monoxide example, somebody who had experienced carbon monoxide poisoning before might be more sensitive to being able to determine that that's what they're experiencing again. And then we're also measuring bias, or C, which is the bias a person has towards responding a certain way. So if someone is more prone to a yes response, they have a liberal bias and they're going to end up having more hits and false alarms. And then if someone's more prone to no responses, they have a conservative bias and they're going to end up having more misses and correct rejections. Okay, so my actual experiment had nothing to do with carbon monoxide. I actually created an experiment I used photographs and then realistic drawings for the ambiguous stimuli. And the reason I chose this was honestly just because I found the stimuli really beautiful and interesting, and I just enjoyed putting this experiment together. I also was really curious if participants would be able to tell the stimuli apart. And it was fun. I really enjoyed putting this experiment together, and all of my participants enjoyed participating in it, and they were all really curious at the end about how they had done and which ones were drawings and which ones were photographs. So in this experiment, the photographs were not a signal and the realistic drawings were the signal. Okay, I had 15 participants, which included 11 men, 3 women, and 1 non-binary individual. The age range was between 24 and 72, with a mean age of 37.33 and a standard deviation of 15.77. They participated virtually on their own computers using Google Meet, and I had created a PowerPoint presentation with the experiment on it, and I screen shared it just like I'm doing now. I recruited participants by asking my family, friends, and coworkers to participate. And the participants viewed each stimuli for 5 seconds, and they wrote yes for a drawing or no for not a drawing on a piece of paper. After the 5 seconds, the PowerPoint would automatically go to the next stimuli. Okay, so here's an example of my stimuli. I had 24 stimuli total, which included 12 drawings and 12 photographs that I obtained from the internet. And I did make sure to read very carefully just to make sure that I was using drawings for the drawing stimuli and photographs for the photograph stimuli. So one of these is a drawing and one of these is a photograph. So I don't know if you just want to look, and I'll give you 5 seconds and maybe just think in your head which one you think is a drawing and which one you think is a photograph. Okay, so the image on the left is a drawing and the image on the right is a photograph. So as you can see, it is pretty tricky to tell them apart, and the stimuli were pretty ambiguous for this experiment. So for the results, D prime or discriminability was low at 0.581, and bias or C was 0.06, which is a slight conservative bias. So the results did indicate that the participants found differentiating between the realistic drawings and the photographs difficult, but they did have some success because discriminability is above 0. So it wasn't just pure guessing or chance. And the conservative bias was slight, so the participants did have a likelihood of saying, yes, this is a drawing, or no, this is not a drawing at a similar rate. Okay, application for this study could include just the ability to identify different mediums in art, to identify authentic photographs from simulated photographs. Limitation included, I had a sample size of only 15 individuals, so it was pretty small. And directions for future research can include studying distinguished participant groups. Like, I think it'd be interesting to have a group of individuals that have an art background, and then a control group of individuals with no art background to see if there's a difference in discriminability between the groups. And then another direction could be using other differentiated images, like, for example, using photoshopped images and then non-doctored images, and seeing how the discriminability is in that situation. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me. And if you have any questions, I can answer those now.
Excellent presentation, Rachel. I do have a question. And you reminded me to buy a carbon monoxide detector for my house. So how did you, did you get sick and go to the hospital then when you?
No, actually, so that was kind of a simplified version of the story. What actually happened was everyone at my house was really convinced that it was Omicron variant because they had all heard about the headaches. But I had literally read that a long time ago about carbon monoxide in a Reader's Digest or something. And I was just like, I don't know, this is kind of scary. Like, I don't know, what if? So I had us turn off our furnace and open all the windows. So we ended up, then the next day I went out and I got a carbon monoxide detector, and it went off. And then we had to get the house inspected and everything. So that's pretty bad. I mean, that was not good, but yeah. So everyone still thought it was a virus, but we still opened the windows and everything just in case. So good thing we did that.
All right, other questions?
I have a question. So looking at the drawings versus photographs, you mentioned that, it could make a difference, that the research has implications for graphics that are used and so on. Do you see more like how important, or do you see like ways that would results from your study, what it would mean to something like carbon monoxide poisoning and being able to detect that. I mean, should people use photographs to convey? Should people use drawings? You know, instructions for like I'm thinking about in, you know, when you get something from Amazon and, you know, it's some sort of thing that you need to assemble. Do you see applications, and how do you see those, you know, what your results say about should schematics be used, should photographs be used?
Like, should photographs be used for signal detection theory?
For not so much like for signal detection theory, but results about signal detection theory using photographs versus drawings. Does it say that like photographs would be better to, you know, if you really want to convey information that people are going to be more accurate at identifying, would it be better to use photographs? Would it be better to use drawings?
Oh, okay, I see. So I don't really have the numbers for if there were more like the photographs, they were better at identifying, like specifically they got more of the photographs right. But I would say just the photographs being more like I mean, for the example of the drawings and the photographs, when we look at them, we think of photographs. Like we don't think that they're drawings because they look like what we, in our head, we have the schema of what a photograph looks like. So, I mean, I think as far as just something like being realistic and easy to identify, a photograph would probably be better. Did that answer your question?
It does. I think it sounds like it could be an extension, you know, like, so do you have an idea of how you might change the study in order to address that question? It's okay if you don't. I'm just throwing something out there.
Right. Yeah, I think I would have to think about that a little bit, but yeah, that would be really interesting. But yeah, I'll have to think about that a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
That was a hard question, Dr. Gill. You know, based on your results, so D prime was not very good, right? It was kind of between 0 and 1, right? And so
Yes.
they really can't distinguish between drawings and photos very well. So I guess either would work, right? In terms of presenting schematics to people, is that what you think?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay, when you put it like that, yes. That,
All right,
yes.
very good, very good. All right, so big applause for Rachel. She's done. And let's see, I have Melanie's presentation here at 10:45. She sent me a PowerPoint with video. So let me share that now.
Signal detection theory, high interparental conflict and child custody decisions, presented by Melanie B. Greenham, Department of Psychology and Political Science, Eastern New Mexico University, for the 2022 Student Research and Creativity Conference. Shared parenting is increasingly being ordered by family courts. It's generally beneficial for children. However, in about 24% of divorced families, children are negatively impacted by persistent high interparental legal system are weaponized as forms of intimate murder violence, and protective separations can be needed when pathological parental behaviors rise to the level of psychological child abuse. Signal detection theory measures the ability to detect the stimuli in ambiguous situations. There are 4 possible combinations: a hit, a miss, a false alarm, or correct rejection. A hit is when the stimulus is present and confirmed, so a yes, yes. A miss is when the stimulus is present but denied, so a yes, no. False alarm is when the stimulus is absent but confirmed is present, yes. And a correct rejection is when the stimulus is absent and is also denied, a no, no. The ability to correctly determine stimuli presence or absence depends on discriminability, which is the sensitivity to the stimulus, represented as D prime, and criterion, which is the bias for confirming or denying the stimulus presence, is represented by beta or C. There's low or liberal beta, which means increased confirmations, hits or false alarms, and high or conservative beta, which is increased denials or correct rejections and misses. In this study, the overarching research question was whether lay people could detect an unfit parent who was in imminent danger to their child just by looking at photographs of those parents. There were 2 hypotheses predicting their decision making. The first was that their discriminability regarding parental fitness would be low, and the second was that the criterion or bias would be high, conservative, resulting in increased misses represented by a positive beta. The sample consisted of 33 participants, 11 men and 22 women. Their ages ranged from 18 to 74, and they consisted of introduction to psychology students enrolled at Eastern New Mexico University who received partial course credit for their participation. Family members and friends of the researcher received no compensation. Materials were 24 photographs of parents shown as well-groomed, wearing street clothes and cropped to show only their faces with little background. 12 signal presence stimuli were the photographs of parents who had murdered their child or children while having legal custody of them. The other 12 were signal absent. They were the non-offending co-parents of the murdered child or children. Photograph pairs were arbitrarily ordered in an offender, non-offender pattern, numbered from 1 through 24, and then the numbers were randomized to determine the parent's placement in the ultimate experiment. Procedure: participants were informed that they would see 24 parents' photographs and that some of the parents had harmed their child or children. Participants then viewed the 24 photographs for 5 seconds each and quickly considered the following question while viewing each photograph. Does this parent present any danger to their child? They then answered either yes or no to each parent's photograph. Next 6 slides are examples of actual photographs that were used during the presentation. Total hits, misses, false alarms, and correct rejections were tallied, as shown below in Table 1. Notably, one participant failed to provide a response for one parent. Therefore, you will see that there are 396 responses total for signal present and only 395 responses for the signal absent stimuli. All 4 response categories were average. The hit rate by dividing the number of hits from the number of hits plus misses. Same with the false alarm rate, which is the false alarms divided by false alarms plus correct rejections. An online signal detection theory calculator was used to calculate D prime and beta. D prime was negative 0.215, indicating a low discriminability in detecting unfit parents. Beta was 0.599, indicating a conservative bias towards saying no when deciding if parents were a danger to their child or children. This study produced several notable and interesting results. The first was that fully 1/3 of the participants, 11 of the 33, showed an extreme conservative bias, stating that none of the parents were a danger to their child or children, despite having been told at the beginning of the study that some had done actual harm. The next was that there was a negative D prime value, which means that there were more false alarms than hits. So this is interesting because it was a conservative sample. And so when they tended to answer yes, this parent presents a danger to their child, they were doing so more often when shown pictures of non-offending parents than when shown pictures of offending parents. And the last was that the highest numbers of false alarms were triggered by two specific non-offending parent pictures. Notably, some limitations constraining the generalizability of the study were that it used a multi-method recruitment approach, and therefore it could be a non-representative sample. Also, there were possible visual cues in the two signal absence stimuli that triggered more false alarms. And finally, as lay people, many of the participants reported afterwards having felt unqualified to decide parental fitness. And so future studies should target actual court development professionals who make decisions like this, such as family court judges, custody evaluators, and guardians ad litem. Thank you for your time today. And if you would like any additional information or if you have any questions regarding this project, you are welcome to contact me at melanie.greenham@enmu.edu.
All right, very good. Thank you, Melanie. Let's see, I think she's gone now because she has a prior commitment. Let's see. If you want to make some comments now, we can do that because we have a little bit of time before Zachary's presentation. Would it be easy to, recognize if a parent was unfit or harmful just by looking at their face? I think that's what Melanie was trying to get at. What do you think?
And if I could, Dr. Bond, I'd like to add to that question. With respect to the stimuli that were selected for the task, what role do you think the poses, the faces, the people were in, and the expressions on the faces of the individuals, what do you think that might do for within the context of the stimulus presentation?
To answer Dr. Bond's question first, no, I don't think it would be easy at all. Specifically because, as Dr. Speller mentioned, like we look more for facial expressions, and, in terms of like looking for those in pictures, that more just involves like their mood when the picture was taken, and that has more of an influence than whether or not they're actually a good person, which is impossible to tell from a picture.
I also have some concerns about this kind of stimuli actually, because I'm mainly cross culture, and I study emotion too. Like Zachary said, that's quite important point. Facial expression has a limitation. Not only that, also I wonder if that she controlled gender biases and attractiveness. Not that I study that aspect, but I'm sure that's quite important when you create such stimulus, you know, so.
Yeah, I think it would be very difficult though to, get permission to, take photos of the offenders and include those and also the offenders' spouses. So I think she did the best she could with the stimuli that was kind of widely available, I guess, on the internet. But I agree that emotion and facial expression probably, influence the way people respond, yes or no, on this study.
Okay, so she was using actual offenders in this case and some non-offenders.
Yes, that's
I
correct.
think I missed that element of it. Okay, so sure, if you were including those actual offenders, then you probably won't necessarily get them in a lineup or have face neutral or position neutral pictures of them. So I can understand that. But good points raised by all.
Right. All right, Zachary, are you ready to go?
Yeah, just about. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my presentation on signal detection theory and addiction in PET scans. Now, we've heard quite a bit about signal detection theory from the past couple of presentations, but just to kind of briefly go over it again, signal detection theory is essentially a technique for measuring responsiveness to stimuli in ambiguous situations. And at its core, it involves giving yes or no answers in regard to a particular stimulus. So, totally forgot about that. One of the examples that I like best when thinking about signal detection theory is thinking about if you've ever gotten your ears checked at a doctor's office. They put the headphones over you, they give you a button, they tell you to listen for a beep in one ear or another. If you hear a beep, you push the button. Your doctor is using principles of signal detection theory to test your hearing. The beep is acting as the signal. You pushing the button is you saying yes. You not pushing the button is you saying no. And when we do signal detection theory, we're looking for four main things. We are looking for hits, misses, false alarms, and correct rejections. And if we go over and look at this little matrix, we can see that a hit is when a stimulus is presented and you correctly answer that it was presented. The beep goes off, you push the button, that's a hit. A miss is when a stimulus is presented, but for whatever reason, you don't hear it or you don't see it, and so you respond that it was not there. A beep occurs, but you don't hear it, you don't push the button, that's a miss. A false alarm is when no stimulus is presented, but you say that it was. No beep is present, but for whatever reason, you still hear something, you push the button, that's a false alarm. And a correct rejection is when a stimulus is not present and you correctly answer that it is not present. And we use these, the ratios between these things, if you will, to look for two key things, discriminability and bias, which are represented as D prime and C respectively. Discriminability is essentially just how good you are at distinguishing or discriminating between a signal and a non-signal. And mathematically, when D prime equals 0, that essentially means that the participant was just guessing on the whole and wasn't really able to discriminate between the two. And the further away you get from 0, so you get closer to 1, and then 2, and then 3, that is a higher discriminability, and the participant was overall better at discriminating between a signal and a non-signal. And bias is essentially a participant's tendency towards answering either yes or no, regardless of the actual state of the stimulus. And when C equals 0, that means there is no bias present. Negative C when C is negative, that means that the participant was liberally biased and more likely to say yes more often. And the further away it gets from 0, the more biased they were. And vice versa. If you are conservatively biased and you are have a tendency to saying no more often than yes, then C will be positive, and the higher it gets away from 0, the more bias that was present. So you may be wondering, what do addiction and PET scans have to do with signal detection theory? Well, there are subtle differences in the structure of normal brains versus brains addicted to various substances. In the case of my study, I used the PET scans of individuals who were addicted to cocaine. And because of these differences, you can actually set up a signal detection theory experiment where you show people, where you try and see how good people are at discriminating between a PET scan of a brain that is not addicted and the PET scan of a brain that is addicted. And I decided to do this because I've been interested in both addiction and neuroscience for a long time. And when Dr. Bond first presented the idea of doing a signal detection theory and experimental psychology, he mentioned or recommended to me rather, that I could do something with brain imaging scans of people who suffer from a certain psychopathology and people who don't. And when he mentioned this, I immediately thought of addiction and PET scans. And the reason I decided to use PET scans in particular is because they're a little bit easier for lay people to kind of see the difference. I'll show you in this next slide. So on the left, you have a PET scan of a normal or non-addicted brain, and on the right, you have a PET scan of an individual addicted to cocaine. And it's kind of, the differences are very subtle, but you actually can see them if you look kind of closely. On this edge, it's a little bit, there's more red than yellow than there is over here. And also over here, there's just more blue space overall in this area. There's a bit of a gap. It's easier to see differences in a PET scan than it is to see differences in, say, an fMRI image. So that's why I went with PET scans. So essentially the way I did this was I recruited 8 people to participate in the study, friends and family members of mine. 3 were male and 5 were female, and their ages ranged from 19 to 50. The mean age was 36 and the standard deviation was 18.19. And so 24 PET scans were pulled from the internet, which means I got them from a variety of different sources, though I did vet each source to make sure they were legit. I took 12 scans of normal brains and 12 scans of cocaine-addicted brains, arranged them randomly. Naturally, I had an answer key, and essentially participants had 5 seconds to look at each image and decide which images were of normal brains, which acted as the signal in this case, or cocaine-addicted brains, which acted as the non-signal. The way this worked in practice was essentially I just had them, they had 5 seconds to look at it and say out loud whether or not they thought it was say out loud, yes, if it was a normal scan, or no, if it was a cocaine-addicted brain scan. So I had 2 hypotheses for this study. The first is in regards to discriminability. I figured discriminability would be poor and that D prime would be close to or equal to 0 because all of my participants were, not professional neuroscientists. They had no official training in neuroscience or reading brain scans. And I predicted the bias would be liberal because they wouldn't be very good at discriminating between the two. I figured they would just go with the safer choice, or what felt like the safer choice, and just say they look normal. And ultimately, the results did support this hypothesis. These hypotheses, D prime was fairly low, below 1, kind of closer to 0, and bias was negative, C was negative, though the bias was not very high. However, some participants, 2 in particular, did exceptionally well, and I don't think it was dumb luck, because I talked to both participants after the study was over, and they both admitted that while they had no professional training, they did have, an outside interest in neuroscience and brain scans and this kind of thing. Just kind of looked at those in their spare time. And so at this point, you may be wondering, why does any of this matter? And that's a fair question. And this study in particular had many limitations. It had an extremely small sample size. The sample size were people related to me and friends of mine, which is not very representative of the general population. And so, but it's still interesting to think about because there is some debate as to whether addiction alters your brain in any meaningful or significant way. Now, we know that heavy drug use does affect your brain, but there is some argument and question as to whether or not it's, something, whether or not it should be the main focus of addiction. And I think this type of study could be adapted to help settle this debate. If you recruit professional neuroscientists who have lots of experience looking at brain scans and looking for discrepancies and things like this, and you test their discriminability with some scans that are, maybe better and a bit more consistent, and all come from the same source as opposed to a bunch of different sources, then I think you could adapt the study to kind of, settle this debate a little bit. But regardless of the results of such studies, I think it's worth mentioning that viewing addiction as a purely neurological condition has severe limitations, regardless of how intense the brain changes are. And this is because addiction in a lot of ways is more multifaceted and more complicated than a condition like, say, Parkinson's, where you have very specific changes in the brain that create very specific symptoms. It's not quite as clear cut or as, it's not as easy or clear as that. And, while all of the limitations are a bit outside the scope of this talk, I do think it's still worth thinking about because it is an important issue. And I think it's worth tackling it from multiple different angles. Thank you for your time and listening to me babble for 10 minutes. If any of you have any questions, I will take those now.
So I have a question. Did you train participants? I mean, so no. Actually, I want to ask that you want to test. So your title is actually about how people can identify addiction pattern over the brain, right? And did your participants knew which one's the normal healthy brain image?
No, they did not, and that was kind of that was like the main point of the study, right? Is I wanted to recruit people that specifically had no professional training. Like I said, though, 2 of them did very well and kind of were able to more tell like the difference between a normal, healthier brain.
I understand that, but at the same time, it's confounding, isn't it? Because you want them to discriminate with the addicted brain with from normal one, but then if they don't know what they're looking for, how can they even discriminate?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I see what you mean, but at the same time, it's confounded, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, no, and that's totally fair, and that is yet another limitation of this study. Really, I guess it was more like less about like addiction and just seeing if
if they can see some differences between images.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
So kind of following up on that, I think like your discussion of the applications of this in terms of looking at neuroscientists and how they would discriminate. What would you anticipate that you would find or that you would look for in the way of maybe experiment or bias in using signal detection theory to with neuroscientists to identify experimenter bias?
That's a really good question, and I'm not sure that I actually know how to answer it. If I'm being totally honest, if I had to anticipate bias specifically, I really am not sure. You know, like how, like I really couldn't say what experimenter bias would be. You know, that's a really good question, and I actually kind of want to think on that a bit more, because that's, yeah, no, that's a good question, and I don't really know how to answer it.
Fair enough.
All right, anything else for Zachary? You did very well. Okay. All right, I'm going to play Melanie's second presentation right now, so if you'll bear with me.
Dr. Bond, your computer is muted and we're not getting any audio.
All right, I'm sorry. Let's see, the audio is not loud enough. Can you hear it?
I wasn't sure if you were playing it through your speakers in your office or if it was playing through the Zoom, if it was picking up the computer audio, but either way, there was no sound.
Okay, let me try it again.
There were a number of predictions made in this study, which I have grouped into 4 categories in the next 3 slides. The first category was specifically in relation to the affect bias, the effect that it would have on positive memories, negative memories, and negative memories that specifically involve the death of a loved one.
Thank you.
It predicted that the emotional intensity of positive memories would have remained stable, while the emotional intensity of negative memories would have faded, and that the emotional intensity of death memories would have faded more than positive memories, but less than the non-death negative memories. Next category of predictions is regarding depression and PTSD symptoms, and whether or not higher scores in those classes of symptoms would also relate to lower fading affect bias. It was predicted that both depression and PTSD symptoms would be negatively related to fading affect bias. Third category of predictions is regarding open or unresolved versus closed or resolved memories, and the affect or ratios that would be found within those open or closed memories. It was predicted that 178 participants, all from various regions of Mexico in this study. 130 of them were women, 47 were men, and one participant did not identify their gender. Their ages ranged from 18 to 66, and they were compensated via a drawing raffle for three $50 gift certificates. The materials that were used in this particular study, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the entire study was conducted online using site-based software. Procedure involving participants being randomly assigned to one of three conditions by the site-based software to write a short narrative about either a positive memory, a negative memory, or a negative memory that specifically involved the death of a loved one. Participants were also asked to give emotional intensity ratings both for the time of the event and currently. Scales used were the Spanish PTSD checklist civilian and the Center for Epidemiologic Studies, the short depression scale in Spanish. The narratives were then coded for the type of death if they were assigned to the death category as either a violent or a non-violent death. For the results, I categorized those in the same manner that I did in the prediction section. First category, feeding affect bias effect on positive memories, negative memories, and negative memories specifically involving the death of a loved one. An analysis of variance was conducted, and no difference was found in memory vividness across the types. A difference score was created by taking the ratings of the emotional intensity given at the time the event occurred minus the rating of the emotional intensity now for positive memories. For negative and death memories, that was repeated and the result was multiplied by -1. Two equal to comparison showed that negative memory difference scores were significantly different from positive memory difference scores. Negative memory difference scores were also significantly different from death memory difference scores. Positive memory difference scores were also significantly different from scores. Participant ratings of emotional intensity at the event and now for each memory type are shown here in figure 1. You can see from this figure that there is significant fading in the negative and death memories, but not for the positive memories. With regard to depression and PTSD symptoms, we predicted the entire symptoms of each of these disorders would show lower fading of emotional intensity across all memories recorded in the study. However, the results only partially supported this hypothesis. Depression symptoms were not shown to have any significant correlation to fading of affect, whereas PTSD symptoms were found to have a negative correlation to the fading affect bias. As to the open versus closed memories and the affect word ratios, there was no main effect or resolution found in the study. Therefore, that hypothesis concerning open versus closed resolved versus unresolved memories and emotional ratios was not supported. Finally, we had predicted there would be greater proportions of affect words in narratives regarding memories of loved ones' deaths involving violence. A t-test with independent variable types of death, non-violent versus violent, measured the percentage of affect words in the transcripts. The affect words were not found to be higher in the violent death memories as opposed to the non-violent death memories. Therefore, this hypothesis was also not supported. This study found that the emotional intensity of Mexicans' memories of loved ones' deaths do exhibit fading, but not as much as other negative memories. Emotional intensity fading is unrelated to whether the memory is open, resolved, versus closed, resolved. During the pandemic, Mexicans exhibited higher PTSD symptoms than in other past studies involving this community. In Mexicans with higher prior studies regarding faded affect bias. Secondly, the site data platform did not assign conditions to the participants in the portions. Therefore, we ended up with unequal size groups of positive, negative, and death memory categories. We did end up with a large number of death memories, which provided a representative distribution of the violent versus non-violent death memories. Thank you for your time today. And if you would like any additional information or if you have any questions regarding this project, you are welcome to contact me at melanie.radio@kmu.edu.
All right, and there's Melanie's second presentation. Let's see, we've just written the paper and we were asked for a revision of the paper, and we're concluding that now so we can resubmit it for publication. Do you have any questions about this study? All right, very good. Let's see, Mari, are you ready to present?
Yes, sir, I'm ready.
All right, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Can y'all see my screen okay?
Yes.
Alrighty. Good morning, and thank you everyone for attending my research. So my name is Mari Ortiz Galvan, and today I will be presenting a research project that I worked on called Are They a Criminal? So this is a signal detection theory is what I used. It's a method that I used, and we did go over it in previous presentations, but I'll go ahead and kind of do a rundown for it. The signal detection theory is used as a method to measure a person's ability to discriminate stimuli and to describe their biases and decision-making. So participants may be asked to hear or memorize a signal, and in turn, participants must say yes or no. And from there, the experimenters may decide what the participants' responses hold. So this is actually, signal detection theory is a pretty common theory that's used. The audio detection is what uses signal detection theory. You know how we did that in elementary, middle school. Raise your right hand if yes, you hear a signal, raise your left hand if no, you don't hear it, you know, things like that. That is what relates to the signal detection theory. So that's kind of where I included my project. So the different responses may go as followed. A yes statement when it's correct is a hit, and a no response when it should have been a yes is a miss. And then if it was a yes response when it should have been a no, it's considered a false alarm. And lastly, when a no response is given and that is correct, that is considered a correct rejection. Now for criterion, the possible biases and the criterion that the observer may choose is what's initially going to be chosen as the criterion. So in this experiment that I conducted, participants were given 24 slides with sets of eyes in black and white. The object of the experiment is to see whether or not participants are able to determine if someone is a criminal or not based on their eyes. The purpose of this study is to see how certain people may determine if the pictures represents the eyes of a criminal or not. In turn, my predictions entailed that people would be cognitively biased based on their own experiences regarding criminals and non-criminals. Therefore, people's perceptions, biases, discriminations may not allow for any accurate result of identifying who is a criminal and who is not. This experiment entails benefits by allowing researchers to understand the influence that cognitive biases, perceptions, discriminations, and that people have them. By researching the possibilities of cognitive biases interfering in important decisions and perception and biases within the criminal justice system, this will allow us to elaborate on this experiment and have us understand not only how the world views criminals, but maybe in turn how criminals view others as well. For my experiment, I had a total of 31 participants, 14 of them being men and 17 of them being women. Their ages range from 19 to 65 with a mean of 26 and a standard deviation of 12.2. These participants were randomly selected. Some were family relation, Eastern New Mexico students, friends, coworkers, and I collected these responses via video call or in person with them. So that way I was able to control what they saw and how they saw it. Upon reading the experiment directions, participants were given the option to consent and withdraw from the experiment at any given point in time. I definitely emphasized that so that way no one felt pressured into continuing, and even if it was at the very end, they felt like they didn't want to continue, they didn't have to. These participants didn't receive any partial course credit or any compensation for participating as well. Regarding my materials, 24 sets of stimuli were presented to the participants in a PowerPoint. I would also like to point out that they were all randomized once they were put into the PowerPoint. So 12 of the stimuli were signal present and 12 of them were signal absent. So my 12 stimuli signal present, they were actually mugshots taken from the New Mexico State Department of Corrections. And then my other 12 stimuli that were signal absent were photos taken from Wall Street journals, business articles, kind of people living their everyday life in their work settings. Now, participants accessed the materials via screen share or in person, and they recorded their responses on a piece of paper that was labeled from 1 through 24. Regarding my procedures, before the initial presentation continued, I once again made sure that consent was there, they knew about withdrawing, staying in the participation and whatnot. Once consent was given, the participants were given 5 seconds per slide to decide if there was a signal present or if a signal was not present. After each slide, participants were to write down yes, present, or no. The experiment instructions that were shown to participants is on the next slide. So this is what participants saw regarding experiment directions. Along with my debriefing. Now, this was also taken from my experiment that participants saw. Basically, this experiment was designed to detect if a person could determine if someone was a criminal by looking at different sets of eyes. Now, I was particularly interested in how people may decide how someone's eyes may determine if they are a criminal or not. And in turn, I expected people would be biased based on their experiences regarding criminals and experiences with non-criminals. This experiment has allowed me to conduct thorough results regarding possible perceptions, biases, discriminations upon choosing from the images. The study allows myself and other researchers who may want to continue with the research to have that data and support other research experiments, whether it be this one or something elaborating a little bit more. So I gave a little bit of an example, and this is one of the pictures that I used in my experiment. Basically, yes or no, are they a criminal? In this case, excuse me, this person was a criminal. An example 2, and in this case, this person was not a criminal. Now, I specifically used that picture, the first criminal picture. I wanted to represent this one because there was actually a lot of people who got this one wrong. A lot of people said, no, that's not a criminal. And in fact, it actually was. Regarding my results. So I took each participant's hits, misses, false alarms, and correct rejections, and I calculated it individually, and then I added them all together as a whole, like an average. So total, my hits were 256, my misses were 115, my false alarms came in at 144, and my correct rejections came in at 229. Now, in order to calculate this data, I took the average of each participant's score percentage and as a whole, it resulted in an average of 64.8%. So relaying this data, I determined it based off a 70% passing score. And because it was 64.8%, it fell below that passing score. So in turn, I concluded that the average individual was not able to determine a criminal based on an image of their eyes. Now, I did this one as a group whole just because I did have a lot of participants and I wanted to see how it is as a whole rather individually. But I did include my D prime and my beta, so that way, you know, I could determine what most of my participants kind of lean more liberal or conservative. And I actually came out with the conclusion that they leaned more liberal. So based on my experiments data, it does support my hypothesis in telling that people would be cognitively biased based on their own experiences regarding criminals and non-criminals. Therefore, people's perceptions, biases, and discrimination may not allow for any accurate result of identifying who is a criminal and who is not. This would also support any theory on cognitive bias, which explains the general idea of people's perceptions being diverted by biases that occur from environmental factors and life experience. And in a way, that's kind of what I was trying to touch on, is people have different environmental factors, different life experiences. So their own biases in their mind, they're not going to accurately be able to take that out and be like, yes or no. So in future research, I think the amount of participants should be increased in order to produce more accurate research and data. And I also think it may or may not be smart to add like background information about each participant, because there is room for bias, whether you get someone who is a victim of crime or maybe someone who is an officer in the law. On average, more participants believed an individual was a criminal when they were not. So they stated a more liberal belief as a whole. All righty. Thank y'all guys so much for coming to my presentation. And if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, please let me know.
All right, any questions for Mari here?
Do you think that anyone could ever get particularly good at this task with practice, like just, you know, constantly looking at pictures of like people who are criminals and people who aren't? Like, do you think this is like an actual skill someone can develop?
You know, that's a good question, because I kind of debated on that as well while conducting this research, because like me personally, I'm very into law and psychology. So I constantly am looking at mugshots. I'm constantly looking and researching and trying to find new ways how psychology and criminal justice, you know, are incorporated together. I think it's plausible if you study and, you know, but I also think that it's plausible for someone who is, I guess, prone to studying those mugshots and whatnot. I mean, I think it's a possibility. That's a good kind of like limitation right there. I didn't think of that. That's a good one. So I hope that answers your question. Did that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll ask you a question now. Do I look like a criminal?
No, Dr. Vaughn, I do not think you look like a criminal.
But I could be one, right?
Definitely. Yeah, of course. I mean, I have walked by, I don't know, a lot of people have read some serial killer books, but there are people you would walk by, like Ted Bundy, for example. You can walk right by them and you would never be able to tell that they're a criminal. It's the charm. It's using psychology to be able to trick people. And that's what a lot of criminals have, is they have that mental manipulation to be like, present them as something that they're not.
Like if anything, Dr. Bond would get involved in property crime. I don't know why. That's just
Well, I think, you know, I've been to prisons and done research there, and I think that some people, you know, they get caught up in a situation, their emotions get overwhelming, and sometimes they do things that are against the law and they just end up there. But, you know, I don't know that we could ever look at a person and see if they, you know, are a criminal or not. That's just my opinion.
Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of where I was trying to relay with my research with, was as many like, you know, factors that could possibly either hinder it or boost it. There's really probably no way that we could actually accurately tell if someone's a criminal or not.
So I have a comment. I agree with you guys actually, but some studies, like perhaps you guys know that first impression studies, they claim that people usually can tell even sexual identity by just by interacting for 3 seconds or just looking at the picture. I think, well, I mean, at this point, it can be controversial, but that data was really robust at the time, like perhaps 10 years ago, I guess, that kind of research. And also, yes, like any other, I mean, but it is, I think, in a way, we have to still try to figure out what's the best technique to understand these things. So I guess it's attempt that made. Thank you, though. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks so much, Mari. Brianna, are you ready to present?
Yes.
Great.
Oh, so she is from counseling department?
Yes.
And she's a graduate student. I know some of you guys want to go to counseling direction, and it's other evidence that it is important to actually, you know, do research even for counseling. So if you'd like to, you can talk about that when you're presenting your research too. Thank you for coming to our research day, and please talk about yeah, your research. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Thank you for having me. So hello, everybody. My name is Brianna Gilligan. This is a research proposal on the research question, how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected college students' experiences with computer technology? So I don't have any findings, but I'm presenting this in hopes that I can get the funding to carry on this research study. So my problem for this question is not necessarily the 1980s digital revolution where the internet came about and computers. It's the rapid transition that the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic changed our normal use of technology to a new use. So in the privacy of your own thoughts, I would like you to think about the possible changes with technology use that you have made since the COVID-19 pandemic began. My literature review includes 3 different categories: educational, emotional, and social experiences with college students. This is a phenomenological qualitative research design that will be collecting data from focus groups, open-ended interviews, student journals, and existing document and records, which are unofficial transcripts. The purpose of this study is mental health professionals and educators must understand how the COVID-19 pandemic affects specific student populations. There is a lack of research on how college students internalize and externalize mental health symptoms, which can affect their student life, their mental health, and their student success. The findings of this study may also contribute to continuing education sectors such as the American Counseling Association to ameliorate the mental health conditions of college students. From my literature review, beginning with the educational experiences, computer experiences have generally been possible. The ease of typing, being comfortable at home, waking up 5 minutes before the Zoom meeting, maybe, the anonymity of being behind the screen, it's all very comforting. So there are some pros that has came with this pandemic. Emotionally, priorities have changed. The remote effects of online learning has caused students to generally feel like they were not learning as much online, and they did not very well replace in-person courses. In one study, 46% of college students struggled to find the motivation to continue in an online course. And they generally felt that a virtual college experience did not emulate an in-person college experience. Socially, students come to college with varying knowledge of computer technology. For example, there may be a student that comes that has never touched a computer before, or the typical student has been on a computer since 6th grade or before. So these are also things to consider. Also, students really enjoy the resources they have online. They enjoy the internet, easy two-way communication with their professors through email and chatting online with their friends. For my method, this research study would take place in the spring semester of 2023 over a course of 4 weeks. There will be 3 Southwestern colleges that I would perform this study at. I gave ENMU, NMSU, and WNMU as an example, and I will be surveying 3 undergraduate students and 3 graduate students using purposive sampling. So there will be a total of 18 students, and out of those 18 students, there will be non-traditional students, international students, first generation, students with disabilities, the typical students that work, etc. So my first method of data collection includes collecting unofficial transcripts from all participants from May 2019 to May 2023. This is so we can see the grades over time through the onset of the pandemic. Here is my student-informed consent form, which includes the request for unofficial transcripts, allows me to keep their student journals, video record their focus groups, all for research purposes only, which we will talk about in a second. For my weekly journals, once a week for 4 weeks, participants will receive journal prompts asking about their experiences with computer technology. Questions include, what kind of technology do you use? How do you use it? Do you believe technology helps or hinders your life? If so, how? Next will be focus groups. There will be 1 focus group per college, so a total of 3. And out of the 6 students at each college, 4 of them will be participating in the focus group. And we'll be asking more social questions such as, what is your perspective on computer technology? Or what do you think students' experiences will be like in the future? Lastly, I will be conducting interviews with the 2 students who were not selected for the focus groups. And they will be interviewed individually. Questions like, what do you think about virtual communication? And what is your experience with computer technology before the COVID-19 pandemic and now? More personal questions will be asked for those individual interviews. For my triangulation, for analyzing the data, there will be 4 methods I will be using, which include data analysis, which is detecting patterns and creating coding schemes and going back again so we can see the similarities between the responses that are given. Narrative analysis is to interpret people's stories to understand their mindsets and perspectives. Thematic analysis is analyzing those similarities from focus groups and interviews and being informed by the coding scheme. And grounded theory is letting the data speak for itself, creating a theory that comes from the data with no bias or preconceived notions. Here's an example of a coding scheme that I predicted I would see. So my predicted themes would be college experiences that are positive, negative, pre-COVID-19, post-COVID-19, with the acronyms PEXB, NEXB, Pre-C, and Post-C. Threats to validity may include the closeness of the researcher to the participants. So over a course of 4 weeks, there may be some unintentional bias or favoritism towards participants. Also, the request for unofficial transcripts. So students may not consent to giving an unofficial transcript or may provide a false document, which would not be applicable in the data analysis. Also, there may be a lack of participation in the interviews, focus groups, or journals. So we can only analyze the quality of the answer that we get. For credibility, we are surveying the right population. So these are actually college students living through the COVID-19 pandemic, which positively validates the patterns of exhibited behaviors. Prolonged participation on site with the participants. So over a course of 4 weeks, I think is a great amount of time to get to know the participants and their experiences. There will also be member checks and peer debriefing, which includes sharing the findings with the participants and consulting with my colleagues to look over the study. So here are all my resources, but thank you for watching my presentation.
All right, very good. Thank you, Brianna. Do we have questions? I do have one question about phenomenological research. You know, I've been teaching my students in a few classes about how to collect data from interviews that don't, you know, become biased in terms of questioning. And I noticed that you have structured kinds of questions. And I usually ask my students to go ahead and ask a big question at the beginning and then say, talk for about 5 minutes about everything that you think about when you think about this question, right? So what is the meaning of life? Talk about that for 5 minutes, you know. Tell me what's different about unstructured questioning and bias and structured questioning and bias.
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's all about having a, you know, with qualitative data, it's hard to put those holistic questions into a measurement or a category. So I think it's all about having the non-biased questions to begin with is really going to help you out, because that will ruin your whole research study if you have questions that are making participants lean towards a certain way, and then there's no point of the research study. So sort of being very careful with how you ask the questions and also being very careful with how you analyze the responses will, I think, help with the unbiased.
So I have one question. Have you considered implementing before you kind of, and I think this helps also to address really issues with questions that may, I mean, you may think you have questions that don't lead to bias, et cetera, but how do you know until you really get into it? And I guess my question is, have you thought about maybe including within the design a pilot study really to help you iron out some of those issues with the questions?
No, I haven't considered that, but I think that's a great idea. Something I forgot to mention is obviously in the qualitative study, you know, it's a lot of reanalyzing iteratively. So I think that would be a really good option because I think I am dealing with a broad study here. And so a pilot study would really help narrow down, make sure my questions aren't biased, and allow college students to sort of have a more structured, more specific realm that they could answer to.
Thank you.
Good. Thinking of your samples, let's see, you're using ENMU, WNM, or what it was, NMSU and W, whatever that is over there in Silver City, right? What are differences between the, are there differences between those areas?
Other than the cities themselves, I think they would generally be the same, I would guess. I chose those Southwestern colleges in terms of convenience to me, but I have considered choosing other areas of the United States because I think that's when I would see a real difference.
That's interesting. And now that, we can conduct studies online or via Zoom, right? It shouldn't be as costly as you would think to travel over the internet to, do your interviews and focus groups and things like that. So could you do this all virtually?
Absolutely, and that's something I have considered. I think there is a way to make sure that students' information can stay safe. I would like to find different programs to ensure that whenever we do have the interviews or the focus groups online, that we can keep it intact and keep the purpose of the study in the front.
All right, very good. Do we have questions from students or other faculty members? I guess it's lunchtime and everyone's quiet. Is that what's going on? All right. Well, thank you very much, Brianna, for coming. That was interesting. I liked it.
I did have one question or comment. Sorry, my other button was muted there. I was just wondering if you gave any consideration to other kinds of personality or trait kinds of inventories to go along with any of the information that might give insight into their pre versus post COVID experiences. So perhaps there's something in there that can just give you a highlighted perspective on their outlook on school as it relates to something within their own personality, or any of those other kinds of measures. Forgive me if I may have missed that part, but if you just have any thoughts on that, or if it's not applicable, then just let me know.
No, I think that's an excellent thing that I could include in a pilot study. I never even considered that. So thank you all for your suggestions. I'm definitely going to write these down. And this is definitely a research study I really love, and I really want to continue changing it and improving it. So thank you. I'm definitely going to add that.
All right, thank you, Brianna. Leslie, are we wrapping up here? Dr. Gill?
So I haven't, we can. I don't know if we wanted to take a brief break just to tabulate results and then come back. I wasn't sure how to handle that. I don't see, oh, Rebecca is here, so we can go ahead and move into the awards and induction, but I don't know if we want a brief break, if we're going to include announcing the winners from our session, the awards from our session, or not.
Yeah, we can take a break and listen to Rebecca as she presents, and then we can, text each other on the
Okay,
boards. Okay, Rebecca?
so
Yes, sir.
Yes, go ahead, please.
All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rebecca Rojas Guerrero. I am the president of both the Psychology Club Pavlov Towns and our sister counterpart, our national representation of Psych High. It is lovely to have y'all here today. I was asked by Dr. Gill today to do a short little presentation about the clubs, about both of our clubs and what we can have to offer for students here on ENMU. So first and foremost, I have been an active participant for Pavlov Towns for about all 4 years now, since 2018, since I first came to Eastern. And it has been nothing but a positive experience for myself. That I can say I've really learned to grow and evolve, especially in the psychology department, of taking the various classes and just getting more into the psychology field. And on the flip side, on the social side, being in a club of like-minded people who enjoy and participate in the same field as I has also been a wonders to me. Being able to share my experiences and learn from others is truly what psychology is about. Just about learning and growing and sharing. And so that has been a wonderful part of my experience here at Eastern. Some other things that have occurred in the past with the clubs is that we have gone to conferences. We have sent a research group to Denver, and as part of the psychology club, we were luckily able to send a small group up to the Southwest Psychological Conference in Albuquerque in spring of 2019, and I was fortunate enough to be a part of that experience. And really, it just I can only speak for myself, but I believe for other members, it really opened up our eyes to, the day-to-day, to just more experience in the psychology and what the research is really getting into, and especially at the different universities. I know some of our members wanted to go into art therapy specifically, or some of them wanted to be more traditional counselors. And even just being in the space and area of vastly different research and experiments of psychology that was happening at the time was very eye-opening. For myself, I was that one participant in every presentation that we were in. I was always asking questions, be like, oh, well, what about the limitations of this, or what are the considerations of this? Because it was just so magical to see, like-minded people all in the same room and just seeing the possibilities of what the field has to offer and all that. And so that is for our psychology club. We have hit an unfortunate low in members in the coming years, predominantly due to COVID and, just, lack of participants, but it does comes in waves and in highs and dips, as every club does. But, we are always welcoming and offering to any students here on Eastern's campus, if they ever want to join us. I always joke that says like, well, psychology and our cousins, sociology, criminology, all of them, like, we're never going to turn a blind eye away. Such and so forth. So some of the activities we have done in the past, as mentioned before, is our conference. We have done, I believe we have participated in the Hartley House Walk for Domestic Violence that was held in October. We did participate in that. And there were upcoming plans in working with the Hartley House in a fundraiser, in a material drive of just stocking for winter items and and such items, you know, things that the Hartley House needs at the moment, whatever their needs were and whatnot. You know, it's been an incredible experience, you know, being part of the club and seeing it grow. And I can't think anything more than that. On our sister side for Psych-Hi, I'm also president of that. And for Psych-Hi, it is a national organization. So even being connected at this collegiate level, you know, does bring an opportunity of spanning wide, vast of opportunities that can come. You know, the research grants and possibilities to being included into research or even having connections through Psych-Hi is always an opportunity that we do encourage students to look at, you know, if they're considering of joining. You know, and overall, you know, being part of a club, both Psych-Hi or Pavlov's or just any club in general, you know, is always beneficial because you get to meet like-minded people and just sharing the experience in your particular college experience. And so can't recommend it enough. And so I believe we do have a couple new inductees. I don't know if we want to do that right now or
Yes.
if somebody else wants
to. Do you have the form for?
I don't have it. I meant to ask you after class to send it to me.
Okay. I did post it in the group me, but I can probably post it, send it to you through Teams, or I can go through it. However you want to do it.
I mean, can we just do a screen share and then we'll just like bounce off our lines?
Okay. Let me. I don't know if it'll share it with with everyone. So I don't know if you want to do that.
That's fine, as long as we can get something.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay, I think you should be able to see.
Yeah, I see it.
And so do you want to do the president and I'll do the secretary, or?
Yeah, we can just do that.
There are 4. And I can announce the names.
Okay. So for our informal induction, members of Psych-Hi, our purpose in meeting here is to induct into Psych-Hi, the International Honor Society in Psychology, 4 persons who are dedicated students in the field of psychology. Secretary. Have these persons met the qualifications for membership into the society?
The qualifications of these candidates have been carefully reviewed, and we believe they have demonstrated an active interest in the science of psychology and show promise as indicated by their academic records.
You are about to be inducted into an organization that is international in scope, international in interest, and international in opportunities. Active members are invited to participate not only in the activities of the local chapter, but also those of the regional and society organization. Before accepting membership in Psych-Hi, we invite you to hear its standards and ideals. The mission of Psych-Hi is recognizing and promoting excellence in the science and application of psychology. The name of our organization, Psych-Hi, represents the 2 Greek words, psyche and kairos, Psyche suggests scholarship and enrichment of our minds. Therefore, we have chosen as members those whose academic records are outstanding. Kairos stands for fellowship and research. By joining this organization, we work together for achievements in our field through observation, logical thinking, and critical yet tolerant open-mindedness. We accept that a fundamental teaching of psychology is the fact that the individuals differ. This means that they have varying interests and motives, and that they may strive for different goals. We look upon our science as a developing effort to understand human nature. With respect to your association with our chapter of Psychi, we as members have a right to expect you to attend our meetings, participate in our programs, further the cause of psychology on campus, and adopt the role of a loyal alumni in the years ahead. You have heard the aims and ideals of Psychi. Do you, as students in the field of psychology, accept its goals and purposes as your own? If so, say, I do.
I think there's only one student who is a new member who is in attendance, and that is Zachary Kirkpatrick. So Zachary, you can say I do to yourself. But the other new members are Kimberly Rodriguez, Maricela Garcia, and Stephanie Bustos.
Well, we say I do on their behalf. I don't know. You have signified your acceptance of the conditions of membership offered to you. We invite you to sign the chapter roll as the secretary reads your name. Your signature will be evidence of your pledge. And unfortunately, we don't have the candlelight ceremony. I do have a drill, so I can, rev my drill, but, unfortunately, we can't do pomp and circumstance here. All right, we welcome you to our chapter and look forward to our fellowship. Then, do we need to do the installation of officers?
Oh, no, we don't.
Okay.
We'll, yes, so that is it. So we'd like to congratulate the new members of Psychi. And hopefully you will be involved and it will be as beneficial to you as it's been to Rebecca and to Troy and numerous others who've gone before you. And with that, I think we also wanted to announce the outstanding students in psychology. So these are students who are who we've identified as the top students, and we have 7 seniors and 2 juniors that will be receiving Outstanding Students Awards at the Scholarship and Awards Banquet this year. And those students are Caitlin Sally, Melanie Greenham, Kyla Masterson, Ariel Barish, Abigail Turley, Kimberly Rodriguez, Alexis Arguello, those are the seniors, and the 2 juniors are Christopher Gomez and Megan Wiss. So we'd like to congratulate those. And I think that leaves, I don't know, Sion, Dr. Ahn, did you want to announce the winners of the?
You should do it, I think, yeah.
You want me to do it? Okay, so in first place, we have Melanie Greenham. And in second place, we have Rachel. Rachel, I'm not sure which, Dudley. That's the last name that I'll use. So thank you very much. all of you for participating and for your presentations. And I wish you all good luck in the rest of the semester and whatever your future endeavors are.
Thank you so much. Can I ask a question about the clubs?
Yes.
Okay, I was just wondering, would it be beneficial to join those as a distance learning student?
Of course, yeah. Especially over the COVID pandemic, we did primarily meet online through Teams, and we are always open to new members, whether distance or in person, to join.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Just shoot me an email if you want to be included in the club or Psych High.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, I appreciate everybody's hard work today, and want you to have a good rest of the day, good rest of the week, and take care of yourselves, and we'll see you at some point, okay? Either online or face to face. All right, goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, especially for Troy.